About 130 years ago, an organization called Silent Night first appeared. At that time, only conflicts and disorder reigned in the world, the blood of numerous victims, life turned into darkness, and people lost faith in a bright tomorrow. And one day, to stop all this horror, the Murim Masters came together to found the Central Heavenly Alliance. The Alliance decided to create a clan to resist the Silent Night organization. The leader of the clan was Adam Bad. In the world of martial arts he was considered a famous person. When the Northern Heavenly Clan was formed, the Central Alliance promised to provide him with any support. To defeat the Silent Night organization, the Heavenly Alliance helped the clan gain strength and also collect a huge amount of elixirs and techniques. Years passed and Albert Glenn became the second leader of the clan. After him was Noah Albee, and finally the Northern Heavenly Clan received the recognition of people and gathered new followers. The fourth leader of the clan was the man known as the Great Wall of the North, and his name was Ray T. The four Northern Heavens became a reliable support for Ray T and the entire clan. Together they were an invincible five that could deal with any enemies. The strongest of the Great Four of the Northern Heavens was Phil Wright. His fist could hit an enemy with lightning speed and throw him tens of meters away. The next four of the Northern Heavens was the Raging Hurricane, also known as Hugh D. With his spear he could create a deadly hurricane among his enemies. The third strongest of the Great Four of Northern Heavens was the Phantom Curse Blade, Earl Dew. With lightning speed he overtook opponents who did not even have time to defend themselves, he was so fast. And the last of the Great Four of the Northern Heavens was the Lord of Iron Blood, J. Paul. With his whip he performed a real deadly dance for his enemies. The four strongest played a key role in pushing Silent Night away from the Northern Land, and on the day when the fight between Silent Night and the Northern Heavenly Clan reached its climax, Silent Night ceased to exist. As time passed and the Great Wall of the North fell, the eyes of his son, King, came to tears at what might happen to his father. Ray knelt in front of the entire Northern Heavenly Clan as if before a judge. The now former head of the clan looked at the people in front of him and thought that, apparently, only the strongest representatives had gathered here. The nine heavens, who were powerful people ruling the world of Murim, appeared at the hearing. Everyone present was wondering why the Central Heavenly Alliance itself had come. Sage Duke Ran, the genius who revived his family, his desire for knowledge allowing him to become the wisdom of the Heavenly Lord, approached the head of the clan, Ray T, with a question about the reasons for his denial of the truth, about why the one who resisted Silent Night betrayed his comrades. To the sage's accusations, Ray replied that he had always lived honestly, and his betrayal was complete nonsense. Duke Ran, with indifference in his eyes, told him that the four pillars of the Northern Heavenly Clan had opposed Ray, and he continued to lie. The head of the clan looked at each of his faithful comrades, but they all silently turned away from him. Ray was defeated by the fact that those with whom he fought shoulder to shoulder turned against him at such an important moment. With a laugh, the main character thought that now he was truly alone among everyone. With a smile, he looked at his son, showing with his entire appearance that everything would be fine. Looking threateningly at his former comrades, Ray thought that they had all conspired against him, and it would be impossible to get out of here. In any case, they would do everything to stop him. Roaring loudly, Ray shouted to the Central Celestial Alliance that he understood their plan. After hesitating a little, he shouted that he would submit to the Alliance. From his force, even the earth shook and fragments of stones flew around. The Central Heavenly Alliance whispered that Ray's inner strength was simply enormous, and that the Northern Heavenly Clan had become too strong, and now it had only become a hindrance for the Alliance. And as long as the Northern Heavenly Clan exists, the Alliance will not have complete control over the mainland. With all his strength, Ray T shouted into the crowd that from this day on the clan was disbanded, and all followers must leave it and find a new home. This was the last order from the leader of the Northern Heavenly Clan, Ray T. The main character's only request was not to lay a finger on his son, who lost his mother when he was a child and grew up in the barren northern lands. Duke Ran thought that it would be nice to finally end his family, but the crowd would definitely not allow him to do this. The elder had no choice but to simply agree to keep this promise, otherwise the leader of the rival clan would turn against them. Swinging his sword in front of him, Ray turned to his only son, King, with a smile. The boy, realizing his father's intentions, widened his eyes in horror. The father, with pain in his eyes, asked his son for forgiveness, smiled at him for the last time and plunged the sword into his chest. Tears flowed down King's cheeks. Holding out his hand, he rushed to his father with all his might. The Northern Sky Clan was created to protect people from the Silent Night, and they have fulfilled their duty with honor for many centuries. But in the end, the fourth leader of the clan, Ray T, was betrayed by his own comrades. 3 years passed, the guy slowly opened his eyes and was surprised that he was tied with ropes to a log, and a threatening crowd of men stood in front of him. Apparently, the main one was already tired of waiting for the boy to wake up. Before he could finish speaking, the boy received a blow. Staring at the people with displeasure, the guy asked why they were doing this. With a malicious smile, the chief told everyone to look at the eyes of this bastard, who turned out to be stronger than he seems. The man made it clear that he was not as kind as the previous group that was watching the boy and he might not expect kind treatment. He was irritated by the fact that he would have to spend the next 3 years here because of some kid. Leaning closer to the young man's face, the fat man threateningly asked where the guy had put his weapons and equipment, and if he didn't tell, it would be easier to kill him and return back to the mainland. King just lowered his head, which was covered by his long black hair, and laughed loudly. The group was left in shock that the boy was not shaking with fear in front of them, but even had the conscience to laugh almost in their faces. The fat man, stunned by the guy's behavior, told the boy that he didn't fully understand the whole situation in which he found himself. It would be easier to throw him into the wasteland to be torn apart by the wolves, because they don't want to spend the next 3 years in this shitty place. The boy only laughed again and replied that they couldn't do that. The main one, realizing that he really couldn't do this, glanced at his accomplice, who all this time was holding a knife near the guy's fingers. The thug, understanding the boss's signal, slashed the young man's index finger with a knife. The boy screamed from the pain that pierced him and the blood gushing from the wound. The guy, limp and lowering his head, shouted about the 9 heavens. After pausing, he reproachfully recalled the promise made by the Central Northern Alliance to his father, the fat man repeating King's words in bewilderment. The guy raised his head and looked at his tormentors with anger and tears in his eyes. The Silent Night organization has now completely disappeared from memory. Her existence is erased forever, as if she never existed. All that remains of her are only memories of those terrible times. After the first line of defense against Silent Night was disbanded, using the sudden disappearance of this organization as an excuse, the Central Heavenly Alliance decided to send mercenaries to look after these lands. The real reason for the mercenaries' arrival was to keep an eye on a certain person, in case he starts studying the Northern Heavenly Clan's martial arts and planning his revenge. Security will closely monitor him to make sure he sits still, because the person you couldn't take your eyes off was none other than the heir of the Northern Heavenly Clan and the last living descendant of the founder, King T, who was already 16 years old. The last person who followed the boy for 3 years was the former leader of the clan, who allowed King to read only ordinary books so that he would not learn martial arts. Everything related to martial arts was taken away by the Central Heavenly Alliance and the Northern Heavens 4, and even after a thorough check, they could not find any other techniques and books. Meanwhile, after several years of inactivity due to the loss of his father, the boy began to slowly come to his senses. After 3 years of stagnation, he declared that he needed to earn a living and began to learn blacksmithing. Watching the boy, the leader of the third group of mercenaries of the Central Heavenly Alliance, Greg Robin, found it difficult to believe that the heir of the great clan wants to make a living as a blacksmith. But no hidden techniques were found either. But if this is still true, then there is no point spend 3 years here, no. The deputy leader of the third group of mercenaries of the Central Heavenly Alliance, Aaron Fall, did not respond to his boss's thoughts out loud. King, leaving the building, looked for a second at his new caretakers and, turning away, walked on. On the way, he thought that these must be new guards, and they could cause a headache. Stopping at the entrance to a tall building called the House of 10,000 Spirits, the boy went inside. As the building's name states, this place housed thousands and thousands of martial arts scrolls, but the 4 of the Northern Heavens took everything they could from here. Everything that related to sword-handling techniques went to the Phantom Cursed Blade Earl Du. Everything that related to hand-to-hand combat techniques was taken by the Demon Fist Phil Wright. Everything related to leg techniques was taken by the Raging Hurricane Hugh D. And everything related to chi cultivation was taken by the Lord of Iron Blood Jade Paul. Almost all of the Northern Heavenly Clan's disciples followed the Northern Heaven's Great Four, and each of them took part in the destruction of the clan in order to take a leading position on the mainland. Sitting alone by the window, King was visited by sad thoughts that he was left alone. No, he was abandoned by everyone. At night, the guy was haunted by nightmares about his death, who repeated that from now on King was the head of the Northern Heavenly Clan. In the morning, the boy raised his head from the pillow screaming, but quickly calmed down, realizing that this was just another bad dream. The area around the Northern Heavenly Clan had become 10,000 meters extinct. It could easily be said that time had stopped, and the clan's ruin reflected the state King was in. After waking up, he ate the leftover rice, and then went to the forge to further learn the craft, thereby earning a living. After a hard day of work, the boy climbed onto the roof of the House of 10,000 Spirits, and, looking at the setting sun, thought about how pathetic he now seemed. No, he did not rise to show his weakness to his enemies. He rose to build and strengthen his own will. The boy walked and thought that if he failed now, it would mean that his father tried in vain, and the life he gave him was worthless. The boy did not even suspect that while he was walking, immersed in his thoughts, he was being watched and would soon be tied up. When a member of the mercenary team cut the guy's finger, the deputy captain said that they shouldn't go that far, he's just a child. The young man raised his head and said threateningly that the mercenaries did not have permission to do this to him. The boy continued to tell the head that the Central Heavenly Alliance had taken everything clean. If he wanted to kill the guy, he could try to do it. It's just that the disciples of the Northern Heavens Four are following them because they were forced 3 years ago. But there are still people loyal to the Northern Clan. For killing a guy, they will not let them get away. They will immediately see the difference between suicide and murder, and then they will come for the lives of the mercenaries. The previous guards were the same, but they waited quietly for the last 3 years because they knew what could happen to them for killing King. Greg Robin roared at the boy's insolence, and was about to pull his sword out of its sheath and kill the boy for his words. But his deputy stopped him in time, preventing him from doing what he had planned. Aaron Fall explained that it would be better to let the boy go, because there may be a grain of truth in his words. They have already searched this place and have not found any martial arts scrolls or valuable artifacts. Greg reluctantly agreed with his deputy, and ordered the bastard to be released. But the boy did not want to end the conversation so easily. The young man warned ominously that his new guards were only uninvited guests, and should therefore behave accordingly, and if they did so, he would forget about today's incident. In response, the fat man only looked at the guy angrily and replied that he should sit quietly, otherwise the Central Heavenly Alliance and the Great Four of the Northern Heavens would give permission to kill him without delay. One of the mercenary members quickly cut the ropes on the boy's arms, and the stick king was hanging from fell to the floor with a crash. Aaron, with relief in his voice, ordered his subordinates to leave, but to carefully monitor the boy's every move. Although the blood loss was not great, King almost fell to the floor because his arms and legs were so numb from the tight ropes. "I feel guilty for what I did." The deputy head handed the guy a bandage so that he could bandage his wound. Out of resentment, King did not immediately take the bandage handed to him, but the aching wound made itself felt, so he had to do it. Realizing that the guy was in pain because of them, Aaron silently left the house with his head down. With tears in his eyes and silent resentment, King began to wipe the blood from his finger. Falling to his knees, the young man asked a question into the void: why people loyal to the Northern Heavenly Clan did not pull him out of this hell. And having answered his own question, he said that they all simply don't care. They are just waiting for his imminent death. It was already morning when King climbed the stairs of the heart of the clan, leaning on the railing with his sore hand. Everything had really been taken away from here a long time ago. Writhing in pain, he climbed onto the roof of the seat and stared at the once prosperous clan. The clan may be empty, but its heart still beats, the greatest secret of the clan, which even the 4 great pillars do not know. The greatest martial arts scroll of the Northern Heavenly Clan was the clan itself. As the sun sets in the east, the ruined walls known as the Walls of 10,000 Spirits begin to cast shadows across the land. Mysterious drawings on the walls turn into writing on the ground, written in the forgotten language of the Kingdom of the Lower Moon. The Wall of 10,000 Spirits was built by the first leader of the clan, and contained all his knowledge, and was passed on to Ray-T 4 generations later. For this reason, during his childhood, instead of training his son in martial arts, his father taught him the language of the Lower Moon Kingdom. To all other people, these writings were just old carved engravings on the walls. All this was just so that only King T could read them. It might seem like the guy is just wasting his time standing there, so the guards have to keep thinking that way. No, he has to make them think that way. All the teachings of the past leaders are written here. King still has a long way to go before he masters the final martial arts scroll of the Northern Heavenly Clan, the Way of 10,000 Spirits. As long as he is under the supervision of the Central Northern Alliance, he cannot attract too much attention to himself. The guy must keep everything a secret and patiently wait for the chance. The boy did not even notice the cart approaching the clan while he was absorbed in himself. King rushed headlong to the main gate to meet Mr. Murley. Marl Chuck was a former member of the Heavenly Northern Clan. Self-defense was the limit of his martial arts skills, so he was considered the weakest in the clan. However, he was loyal to the clan like no other. Unlike other people, Marl was very happy to see the boy, calling him young master. After leaving the clan, the man began working as a traveling merchant, and did everything he could to help King T. Marl Chuck was an orphan with no talent for martial arts. While other clans refused to accept him, the Northern Heavenly Clan took him in. The leader of the group, Ray T, did everything to teach his ward the basics so that he could at least defend himself. Marl never forgot this kindness, and therefore, when everyone left the clan, he was the only one who continued to help King. The boy was very glad to see his mentor again. They exchanged pleasantries like old good friends. Marl even noticed a noticeable increase in the guy's height. King thanked Murley for coming such a long way for him. The boy's bandaged finger could not escape the man's sharp gaze. With a bitter expression on his face, Marl asked his ward who did this, whether it was the new guards who had arrived recently. Not bothering Marl with his problems, the boy replied that it wasn't them who did it, but that he just accidentally got hurt when he was forging. Without allowing the man to object, King quickly turned the topic to the food brought to him, and Morley had no choice but to simply continue the conversation. The guy was burdened by the fact that his mentor did not live for himself, but continued to help him. But Marl was so grateful to the clan that he simply could not leave the boy in this situation. King was touched that Marl brought not only food and medicine, but also a warm winter blanket. Along with food, medicine and everything else, there was a large black stone in the cart. The guy was a little puzzled by this. The man replied that he received this stone when he was in Anama. This stone fell from heaven, and the whole tribe worshipped it as a deity. With grief, Marl noted that this tribe was exterminated, so the stone no longer belongs to anyone. King repeated his mentor's words with a crazed expression on his face. Marl added that it looked like the tribe was fighting the Broken Fist clan. The boy sadly noted that the Broken Fist also decided to settle in Anama. After the betrayal of the Northern Heavenly Clan, each of the Great Four founded their own clan in Murim. The Cursed Phantom Blade assembled an elite troop of Psy-Mecha users and settled in the west. They became known as the Defenders of the Western Skies. The Raging Hurricane brought together a group that became known as the Flowing Skies, but they remained inactive for a long time. The Lord of the Iron Blood, having received the greatest combat power, built the Iron Castle in the north. The Demon Fist, who was known for his cruel and vicious nature, created the bloodthirsty group Broken Fists. Seeing that the young gentleman was completely sad, Marl remembered that he had brought iron for blacksmithing. Not wanting his mentor to worry about him, King said with a smile that he was using the iron wisely. But for now he needed to go indoors, because it was getting cold, and it was snowing. Taking the sacks from the cart, Morley and King walked into the house, laughing and chatting along the way like good old friends. All this time, the deputy head of the mercenaries, Aaron, was watching them. He thought that there was nothing special about this old man, but his devotion to the clan was impressive, and the boy was now in such a pitiful state. He walks aimlessly, wastes time in the forge, climbs to the top of the tower and looks at the sky. He doesn't even feel chi. With a sad look, Aaron was thinking that this kid had nothing, that time when he was talking about the Central Heavenly Alliance and the Great Four. If King had clarified his story, it would have seemed more plausible. For his age, the guy seems very wise. It's even sad. If he had learned the techniques of the clan, he would have become one of the strongest. While Aaron was thinking about the boy, a messenger hawk flew overhead and the man took off after it. The head of the gang was crying and screaming, because those who sent them to rot in this place are now saying that important guests will soon arrive here. But this is not Don Tin Lake for them to admire. The captain angrily told his deputy to begin restoring one of the royal buildings in the morning. In response, Aaron had no choice but to simply agree with his captain's orders. At this time, King and Merle had already reached the room and with relief threw off the heavy trunks with provisions. The guy poured hot and aromatic tea for the man, who in return praised the young master's magnificent tea. King poured himself some tea, simultaneously asking Merle about the current situation in the world. The man paused and replied that everything was fine. But then I remembered that everyone is now talking about the martial artist George Sinclair, who became famous in Mirim. He said that he would fight and overcome 100 martial artists, so he is now the center of attention. King even choked on his tea when he heard the name George Sinclair. After all, he is the third son of the invincible master, Dan Sinclair, one of the 9 heavens. At first people did not take him seriously and even mocked him. After all, he was only 18. But every time he challenged someone, he left behind himself chaos and destruction. Now he inspires fear and respect among the residents of Mirim. Now George Sinclair has already had about 93 fights and he has not lost a single one of them. And if he defeats 7 more, he will set a new record in the history of Mirim. People privately call him the one who killed 100. King was surprised that this guy is only 18 years old, and he has already achieved a lot. Marl added that at this rate he can become a legend in the world of Mirim. Now he is heading north and many clans are now on edge because of this. King hoped to hear more interesting news from the outside world, but the man no longer had anything to add. So, over warm conversations with a mug of hot tea, time flew by unnoticed, and night came. The young master invited Merle to spend the night with him, but he reluctantly refused. The man promised to return after the winter. Leaving, he simultaneously apologized that he could no longer be useful. The boy exclaimed that the gentleman had done more than was required. They said goodbye near the gate and Marl slowly went back. The guy stood for a long time and waved after him. On the way back to the house, King was called out by the deputy leader of the gang. He was just looking for him. The man wanted to warn the boy that an important guest from the Central Heavenly Alliance was going to visit them in the spring, and they wanted to restore and use the Wachon Palace. King said with indifference that they could do whatever they wanted with the building. It had been empty for a long time anyway. King, turning away, said that if that was all, then he would go. Aaron only sheepishly agreed. The guy wandered lonely under the falling flakes of snow to his place, looking around along the way. Arriving home, the young man noticed the wet snow in front of the door. He realized that while he was away, someone had sneaked into his house. King did not have time to turn around when someone with a bloody hand raised a dagger over his neck. The guy was surprised that this someone was a woman. She asked who he was. Dissatisfied with the woman's impudence, the young man asked her the same question. But someone didn't like this arrangement. She pressed a dagger on the main character's neck so that he started bleeding. Under pain of death, King told her that he was the owner of this place. The girl was fleetingly surprised that the heir of the Northern Heavenly Clan was in front of her. King took advantage of the pause and now asked her to answer the question. Before she could say a word, the dagger fell to the floor with a clang. King turned around and saw that the girl had lost consciousness, most likely due to a large loss of blood. There were deep wounds on her shoulders, chest, and face, from which blood oozed, soaking all the girl's clothes. The guy didn't know what was happening here, where the girl came from and who she was. Maybe she was a criminal. The young man pressed his ear to the girl's chest to see if she was alive and fortunately, she was still breathing. Taking the girl in his arms, King ran out into the street and rushed to another building. While the guy was putting the attacker on the bed, her shoulder was exposed, revealing a deep wound from which blood was pouring. She was poisoned. It looked as if she was being attacked by deadly poisonous qi. King had a protective antidote in reserve that counters the poison and provides treatment to protect the internal circulation of qi. The guy's expression became doomed when he realized that he only had one antidote in stock. He remembered very well that Merle was sacrificing a lot to get it for his ward, and if something had happened to King, then he would have needed this antidote more. He doesn't even know this woman to spend such a valuable thing on her. But, realizing that she could soon die, King could not afford to remain idle. Carefully taking thin needles out of the box, the guy carefully began to stick them into the skin around the wound. There were now 5 needles stuck around the deep wound. Noticing that the wound had stopped bleeding, the young man exhaled with relief. He did everything he could. Exhausted, he looked at the woman and wondered who she was. Lately, surprisingly, King has been meeting more and more unexpected guests. It was only early morning when the girl finally opened her eyes. With a stunned expression on her face, she sat up abruptly, but a sharp pain in her shoulder made itself felt. The girl did not understand what happened, where she was, and finally, who cured her. While the woman was coming to her senses, King appeared from behind the curtain and asked her to wait another second while the porridge was cooked. Seeing the guy, the girl began to remember fragments of last night, how she came here wounded and attacked him, and then lost consciousness from a large loss of blood. She didn't understand how, after yesterday's attack, he decided to cure her. While she was thinking about this, King was already hurrying towards her with a tray on which stood a cup of hot and fragrant porridge. He even thought that she had died while she had been sleeping for 3 days. The girl defiantly asked why someone like him could cure her. The guy replied that at first he couldn't understand whether she had been sent to kill him, or whether she was a passerby on the verge of death. But anyway, he couldn't just stand there and watch someone die right in front of him, so he couldn't leave her there. Confused, King added that at least he didn't want anyone to die in his house again. The girl doubted that the guy in front of her did not do this out of evil intentions, and she also could not feel the chi from him. Maybe he really helped her out of the kindness of his heart. As he left, the young man added that she should hurry up and eat, even though he had been feeding her for the last 3 days. Now the girl would be able to eat on her own. Looking at the guy, the girl said that she would stay here until she fully recovered. King was even amused by such impudence. While getting dressed, the guy displeasedly asked the name of his impudent patient. The girl didn't understand why he should know her name. Pulling on his scarf, King turned around and yelled that he not only cured her, but also allowed her to eat and sleep here for free. And this impudent girl decided to stay here without even asking the owner's permission, so she should at least say her name. Taken aback by this tone and realizing that her savior was right, the girl introduced herself as Charlotte Foz. Having calmed down, the guy told Charlotte that there were clothes and some food in the pantry, so if she ate modestly, then the food should be enough for several months, and besides, he didn't know how long this sign would remain here. Closing the door behind him and not turning around, King said that he would be in the building opposite, and if the girl needed anything, she would know where to look for him. He also reminded, so that she eats the porridge before it gets cold. Left alone, Charlotte thought that she first needed to restore her internal energy and slowly remove the poison from her body. She still didn't understand why King was trying so hard to help her. Maybe he knows who she is, although the girl was an unknown person, but in any case, he's very strange, she thought. Sitting again in his favorite place, King looked into the distance and thought that this girl was strange judging by her wounds, and he was taking such a risk without even knowing her. But he himself allowed her to stay here. Maybe the guy really was that lonely. Pushing away conflicting thoughts, King said the girl's name with a soft smile on his face and thought that it was very beautiful. Nearby, the mercenaries had already begun repairing one of the buildings. Construction was in full swing. While his subordinates worked tirelessly, their leader slept peacefully on a futon, his belly stuffed to capacity with chicken and sake. Coming out of his house onto the street, King looked with concern at the opposite house where Charlotte lived. She had not left for 3 days. The guy was worried about this sight, but did not dare to go to her. At this time, Charlotte was meditating. She managed to restore only half of her internal energy. Under normal conditions she would have needed to fully restore her internal energy, and only then remove the poison from the body. But there was no time for this. This is one of the most dangerous poisons called all-consuming flame of darkness. Charlotte did not know what antidote her savior used, but since the medicinal properties began to dry up, the effect of the antidote almost disappeared and the girl became increasingly worse. It is becoming more and more difficult to fight the poison. It is dangerous, but the girl needs to use all the internal energy that she managed to restore and remove the poison from the body. Gritting her teeth, Charlotte strained with all her might, trying to regain her energy. Unfortunately, the antidote wore off and the poison began to spread throughout the body, causing unbearable pain. On the verge of losing consciousness, the girl thought that this was the end, and she still did not thank King for saving her life. The next second, someone in a black cape and a mask on his face burst into the room through the window. Taking Charlotte into his arms, he felt the skin around her wound with his fingers. The man addressed her as a young mistress and asked her to quickly wake up, focus and use all her internal energy. Not wanting to give up her life so quickly, Charlotte listened to the man and concentrated as much as possible. Someone, seeing that the girl listened to him, told her to direct chi into her fingers. Finally, the poison was removed from Charlotte's body, and her life was no longer in danger. The exhausted girl sighed with relief. If the man had been a little more late, she would have already been dead. The girl was surprised when the man took off the mask from his face. Because it was Kai Hall, he spent a long time looking for where she hid, so he apologized for being late. Kai lives to serve the master and the young mistress, and in the end he failed in protecting both, so he is ready to accept the punishment with honor. Fortunately, Charlotte was in perfect order, and if not for him, she would have been dead long ago. In addition, they were ambushed. Kai could not have done anything in this situation, but the girl was still wondering where the man had been all this time, and when he found her, Kai replied that he was also wounded and was hiding all this time, but found Mrs. just recently. Charlotte didn't understand why Kai didn't go looking for the master first, but the man replied that he wasn't the one to worry about. Now Kai's first priority is to help Charlotte recover, and her idea to hide in the Northern Sky clan was a wise one, because all these bastards will have a hard time believing that they could hide here. Kai thought that it would be better for them to stay here for a while so that the mistress regains her inner strength. The man asked the girl to stay here while he looked for the master, and very soon Kai would return with his orders. At this time, unaware of another guest, King was working in his forge, silently repeating the lines of the scripture. The first source of energy is promised by the shadow, the second source of energy will change the rules, and 10,000 will become one. As the light covers the world, he alone will hold the shadow. The source of all existence may cover everything, but the shadow will always be visible. The second energy can change everything, bringing everything together. The light can cover the whole world, but it will enclose the only true shadow. Just as the void in the eternal night can stretch across the sky forever, the inner shadow must be the same as it exists within that darkness. The guy wanted to practice, so he looked around to make sure that no one was watching him. The first technique from the scripture of 10,000 shadows is inner shadow. The first leader of the sect was a vagabond. He became a brilliant swordsman who was able to create this technique martial arts after many years of wandering. Because the essence of this martial art is shrouded in mystery and darkness. Just by looking at King, it would be difficult for most martial artists to tell whether he has internal energy, and whether he knows martial arts. Even after 4 generations, the 10,000 shadows technique had not reached the highest point of its potential, and was preserved as an unfinished martial art. It is this martial art that King is now studying. If he had the choice to learn the 10,000 shadows technique or not, I would choose the latter. However, since the Central Heavenly Alliance not only took away all the martial arts techniques, they were keeping a close eye on him, so he had no other choice. Taking a katana from his arsenal, which he forged with his own hands, the guy began to practice the 10,000 shadows technique. After a little practice, King got hungry and thought that was enough for today, so he got dressed and left the forge. At this time, having come to her senses, Charlotte went out to enjoy the frosty winter day, and at the same time look at the famous Northern Heavenly Clan. King was walking towards her, saying from afar that the girl looked better today. The guy was worried that something might have happened to the girl because she had not gone outside for the last few days. Entering his house, he invited Charlotte to join him for dinner. The girl didn't know what to say, but still followed King. While this was a great opportunity, she sheepishly thanked the guy for saving her life. Taking the tray with the fragrant food, King was surprised that this nag decided to thank him. In complete silence, they sat down at the dining table, on which there were already cups of rice and tasty meat. The girl was in no hurry to start eating, so King told her that the food was not poisoned, so she could not hold back. Charlotte found it strange that the guy didn't even ask her anything. With his mouth full, King asked what he should ask her, to which the girl replied if he was interested in who she was. The guy wasn't going to pry into other people's affairs, so he didn't even think about asking about it. But Charlotte was wondering why King so easily sheltered the stranger. Continuing to eat, the guy replied that if he found out who she was, he would no longer be able to enjoy the time spent with her. Charlotte was surprised by the guy's answer and looked at him as if he were stupid. King, unhappy with being called a name, shouted at the girl to just eat. Otherwise he could no longer listen to her growling stomach. As usual, at sunset King climbed onto the roof of the building, pondering the fact that his body had already begun to change. There is another secret inside the wall of 10,000 shadows, so it's time to study the Blade of Inner Darkness, a mysterious sword technique that was designed for killing. King studied the basics of fencing to properly learn this sword technique. To practice some more, King went back to the forge. It was already late at night when Charlotte decided to meditate in order to quickly restore her strength. King was already pretty tired. Forging another katana, sweat rolled down his body, which he wiped with a towel. Looking back, the guy jumped from the unexpected appearance of Charlotte. She was quietly squatting and watching him for a long time. King did not notice her either because he was concentrating well, or because his senses were dulled. Charlotte was looking for a guy because she was hungry and wanted to invite him to eat. The young man was furious because of the impudence of this girl. She had been sitting on his neck for 3 months now and had no intention of returning home. The guy's tone didn't bother Charlotte at all, so she continued to ask him to feed her. Under the girl's gaze, King gave in and called her to eat, although he did not understand why he was doing this for a stranger. After 3 months of living in this place, Charlotte realized that the heir of the Northern Heavenly Clan not only did not know martial arts, but he also did not have the foundation to study them. This guy was simply wasting his time on blacksmithing. Noticing that Charlotte continued to sit still, King hurried her. Because she herself asked to feed her, the girl jumped to the floor and ran after him. Finally, the guys sat down to eat at the table, although King made fun of his guest a little. After some time, the Northern Heavenly Clan was visited by very expected guests. These were people from the Central Heavenly Alliance, the Four Dead Heavens, the Crimson Force of the demonic King Gordon Joe, his 14-year-old daughter Ava Joe and his 19-year-old son Alfie Joe, and also the Rand family from the Central Heavenly Alliance, the knowledge seeker Duke Ran and his granddaughter Helga. All of them were important guests within the walls of this clan. Stopping in front of the gate, General Green Clark of the Dead Heaven Force shouted if anyone was alive. The next second, the gate opened, and a bunch of mercenaries ran out to greet the guests. The head of the gang, obediently bowing his head, introduced himself as Ars Robin, captain of the 3rd Mercenary Group of the Central Heavenly Alliance. The general, getting straight to the point, asked if the chambers were ready for them. The captain replied that he himself had personally prepared chambers for them and was ready to take the guests inside, because due to such a long and tiring journey they must be tired. As he was about to follow the captain, one of the arriving guests noticed Aaron. At first the man thought he had made a mistake, but no, it was definitely Aaron. It turns out that Cole and Aaron are good old friends. The guest tried to attract the attention of his friend, but Aaron chose to ignore him. He was clearly not happy about this meeting. Several dozen newcomers entered the clan and hurried further inland to follow the escort. Helga even felt a little sorry for the once prosperous Northern Sky clan, which was now in ruins. Alfie unceremoniously answered her that this is how our world works. If you lose your strength, then you die. A hunting dog is considered a good example, because after the hunt no one needs it anymore. His sister, Ava, was very unhappy with her brother's rudeness. Still unaware of the arriving guests, Charlotte and King calmly walked down the street. The girl was dissatisfied that they always eat only meat, and the guy, in turn, was dissatisfied with the girl's impudence. Coming around the corner of the house, the young man turned his attention to the crowd of people while Charlotte unceremoniously stuck her tongue out at him. They stopped in front of the people, making no attempt to greet them. Aaron and Greg's eyes widened in surprise when they saw an unfamiliar girl within the walls of the clan, whose presence they did not even know about. Alfie, Helga and Ava paid attention only to King, reacting positively to his appearance. The guys, and especially King, did not show much friendliness or enthusiasm when meeting the guests. The girl was tense due to the fact that she could not feel any of these strangers. Most likely her senses were dulled, so she needed to concentrate and not weaken her defenses. Alfie Joe was the first to make contact with King, introducing himself and suggesting that he was the heir to the Northern Sky clan. The man also introduced Helga and his younger sister, who waved her hand at King with special friendliness. The clan heir, after a short silence, decided to introduce himself. He introduced Charlotte, who had been standing next to him all this time, as his cousin, who was temporarily staying with him. The captain of the mercenaries did not understand how they could not notice the presence of a stranger, so he angrily turned to his deputy, saying that by tomorrow they would find out who she was. Aaron only meekly agreed to carry out the order. Alfie, staring at King, was impressed that he even knew who they were. The guy only answered that he had heard a lot about them, because their names are known throughout Murim. Mr. Joe, with a predatory smile, suggested we skip the formalities and talk later. Greg, still angry that this impudent person dared to bring someone without permission, was thinking about teaching him another lesson. The next second, fawning over the guests, Greg led them further into the chambers of the Watchone Palace. While King was moving away from an unexpected acquaintance, Charlotte looked at him and thought that he was not as stupid as she suspected. He knew how to behave correctly and was able to lie without blinking an eye. When the guys went further, the girl remembered that the fat man behaved like an owner, although she thought that the owner of these places was King. It was already night when Alfie Joe and General Green went out onto the balcony of the building. Mr. Joe came here to enjoy the former glory of the Northern Heavenly Clan, but upon arrival, he realized that this place was so miserable. The general was silent, so the guy continued to say that peace on the mainland is just an illusion created by the old men from the Central Heavenly Alliance. They do not want their system to be destroyed, and if they could, they would live forever to continue to use this system for their own purposes. The general finally perked up, replying that he must do his best to help the future masters of the four deadly heavens. Alfie chuckled and turned to his general, saying that he would have to wait a few decades before Mr. Joe would inherit the four deadly skies. But he didn't plan to live that long, so this place would be the start of his journey, and something impressive. With a predatory smile, Alfie added that there was something important left, and he had to deal with it. During this time, King was again working in the forge. He didn't know what was behind him watching until he heard from Alfie that he had never imagined that the sound of a hammer could sound so pleasant. Without looking back, King became worried that he had not noticed him, although he controlled the area. The man was impressed that King, who has no internal energy, could handle the heat of the forge well. Although this place is too boring for him, it feels like time has stopped here. Taking one of the blades from the shelf, Alfie asked the guy how he could live in such a place. King only looked at the uninvited guest with hostility, and remained silent. Running 2 fingers along the blade of the blade, the man added that this weapon was very good, and could be sold for a lot of money. In a moment, Alfie calmly pointed the blade at the guy's chest, causing him to open his mouth in amazement. Mr. Joe did not believe that the heir of the Northern Wall did not study martial arts, and if he really gave up, he would have died long ago. King didn't know what to do in this situation. If he fought him, it would only get worse, not to mention that this man was the son of one of the 9 heavens from the Central Heavenly Alliance. He cannot yet reveal his power, because then everything he has endured will become meaningless. Alfie just stared bloodthirsty at the guy, waiting for him to start fighting for his life. King realized that Alfie was not joking when he, like a snake, made an ejection in his direction. To repel the attack, the young man exerted all his strength in his fist. His eyes lit up with determination to repel the intruder. Watching the boy, Alfie was surprised by the boy's determination. No longer able to control himself, King wanted to stop so as not to fight with him. If he couldn't detect it earlier, then this guy is a master of martial arts, and there is a chance that King will be killed for using the techniques, and for using them incorrectly. If he has to choose, he must choose what will increase his chances of survival. Deciding not to fight Mr. Joe, King exposed himself to a blow to the shoulder with a blade. Having pierced the guy with a blade, Alfie noticed a very strange chi emanating from King. The next moment, Helga and her assistant flew into the forge, shouting to stop. The women ran to the wounded man to stop his bleeding. King, screaming in pain, praised the gods that the blow was not critical. Just as King wanted, Alfie believed that he really didn't know martial arts because he couldn't dodge such a light attack. But if that's the case, then what kind of strange chi was it? Maybe his senses were failing him, although this was quite possible, considering the constant tension since his arrival. Taking her mind off the injured man, Mrs. Run yelled at Alfie for his reckless behavior. Mr. Joe at first did not react to the girl's cry, thinking that he needed to rest, but keep a close and slow eye on this boy. Throwing down the sword, he spread his arms and calmly said that he thought he could dodge something so easy. As he left, he said that this guy was pathetic, and let Helga deal with him. The girl put the spiritual recovery pill in the guy's mouth, a medicine known for its restorative effects. With it the wound will heal faster. Helga apologized for herself and Alfie. She had no idea that Master Joe would be so cruel. From the burning pain, King could not utter a word to answer the girl. Seeing that the guy was feeling very bad, the woman offered to walk him to his room, apologizing to him at the same time. It was already morning when King slowly began to open his eyes. All the time he slept, Charlotte looked after him, and now she was sitting in front of his bed, looking sadly at the guy. She knew who did this to him, but King stubbornly refused to confess. Enraged by the guy's silence, Charlotte called him an idiot. Even if he was weaker than them, he should have at least resisted. Or if he couldn't do that, then he could have just tried to run away. Calming the angry girl, King gently covered her hand with his. He thanked her for her concern. Apart from Mr. Morley, no one had reprimanded him for a long time. Not expecting such revelations from the rude king, Charlotte hit him on the arm. She turned away to hide her flushed face. The girl didn't want to, but still told King that she would have to leave soon. Asking the girl again, the guy tried to rise on his elbows, ignoring the feeling that all his insides were destroyed. The other day, Kai appeared to Charlotte while she was meditating with good news. It came from a master who was safe and fully recovered. The girl was glad to hear good news from her assistant. Kai added that they would have to move out soon, so the young mistress should get ready. At this time, a man stood on a rock and looked at the northern abandoned land, which had a strong vital energy. Noticing someone's presence, the man asked them not to hide like rats, but to show up. Large mounds began to rise in the ground behind the man. Creatures in hats crawled out, one of whom praised the stranger's keen sense of smell. They asked who he was and where he was going. The stranger noticed that these bastards had a rather strange weapon that he had never seen before. The chi emanating from them is not similar to that which emanated from the martial artists he fought with before. It turns out that there are still martial arts that the stranger has not met. He likes the northern region more and more. The man contemptuously called these creatures mole-shaped bastards and replied that he was not going to answer to them. The creature calmly continued to say that it would spare him if the man quietly left here. Confident in his abilities, the stranger laughed and told them to get out of here while he was still polite. Apparently the chief of these beings called the man an arrogant fool. They will believe that he came to help that woman. Preparing for the attack, the intruder told them that he did not know about any woman, but if they were looking for a fight, then he was ready to fight. The creatures all attacked him together with their strange weapons using the hidden power of demonic flame. The stranger turned out to be not so easy to defeat. He even became even more excited about this battle. Strange people did not expect that this guy could survive after their blow. Using the light in his hand, the man wanted to cut the chains fired at him. Realizing that the end could come to them, the chief ordered his relatives to retreat. Without having time to retreat, the creatures flew several tens of meters away due to a large explosion. They were surprised that this guy had instantly dealt with all the hidden ghosts, so they needed to hurry up and unsheath their bloody blades. They used blood for bloody destruction, and will finish off the enemy in one hit. They fought again, but the man was much stronger, even though these creatures were not inferior to him. As a result, the stranger prevailed over his opponents, but there were numerous lacerations on his body. These people used the bone flash technique, in which the opponent sacrifices his body to try to kill his enemy. The man realized that these bastards were not the average martial artists, but were much stronger than he thought, although he did not know who they were, so he had to leave one alive to question. He thought angrily that even a fast sword master was not as strong as them. In any case, he will not allow anyone to stand in his way of joining the Northern Heavenly Clan. When King felt better, he decided to go outside and met Helga there, who was going to give him medicine. The boy told her that this was not his first wound, so there was no need to worry. Still worried, the woman once again apologized for Mr. Joe's actions and for breaking into his home without permission. King only wished to have fun while she was here. Helga was amazed that even after what happened, he treated them with kindness. She expected Masterly to dislike them, especially since her grandfather was one of the 9 heavens from the Central Heavenly Alliance. Helga, trying to win over King, asked him to believe that she was not like her bloodthirsty grandfather, and if the guy asked her for something, she would do it without hesitation. All this time, the bodyguard of the Rand family, Goldie Leg, was watching these two from the roof of one of the houses. Entering his chambers, Mr. Joe was very frightened by Lady Rand, who addressed him. He even thought that it was a ghost. With a deadly look on her face, she turned to Alfie and warned him not to get involved with Mr. Lee. Wanting to quickly get rid of the girl who scared him, he said that he did not think that King would not be able to evade his attack. In any case, he thinks that this kid is pathetic. Helga reminded him that this guy plays a huge role in their plan, and they need to use him as the heir of the Northern Heavenly Clan as much as they can. Fire is blazing everywhere, clouds of acrid smoke are reaching towards the sky, and the demon of Primordial House kills his next victim, piercing her chest with his hand. House of Demon Wilmaroon was disappointed that these people did not even resist. Then a messenger in the skin of a wolf ran up to him. He greeted the gentleman, and told him what happened to the gang of the Hidden Ghost. After transmitting the location of their targets, they awaited further instructions. Contact with them was lost because they were all killed. Wilmer was furious that his elite force, the Hidden Ghost Gang, had been destroyed, but that wasn't all. The messenger whispered in the master's ear that they were all killed by some child, and this child must be in the same place as that girl, and this was a fortunate combination of circumstances. Wilmer shouted to his gang that they were going rabbit hunting. It was already morning when one of the arriving guests finally found his old friend, who had been avoiding him all the time. Elite Tiger Guard, Woody Wyatt from the Four Deadly Heavens, was worried that his old friend had suddenly disappeared. He was worried about him, but he guessed that Aaron would be here. Aaron was angry that Woody was treating him like an old friend after stealing his woman, so he ironically advised the Elite Tiger Guard to focus on his mission and not appear in front of him again. The man still felt guilty about what had happened, although he didn't think Aaron was still angry about it. And with undisguised satisfaction, he said that she herself chose him, and it was she who insisted on marriage. Furious and taking out his blade, Aaron shouted at Woody to shut his fucking mouth. The guard didn't think that his words would make Fall so angry. Aaron, about to kill his friend, shouted that he should not dare lie. She would never do that. Unsheathing his blade, Woody lunged at him, causing Fowl to freeze. His blade was broken into pieces, and there were wounds on his hand and forearm. With an instant change in his face, Woody said that he was just trying to be polite, and Aaron should finally accept reality. He'll be here for a while longer, so it won't be possible to avoid each other all the time, so it would be better if Aaron changed his position in life. Woody didn't hurt him too deeply, so before the wound gets worse, Fowl should go and clean up his act. Aaron remembered that they were both in love with the same woman. She was incredibly beautiful, but Woody was always behind. Until one moment everything changed and she left for him. Then Aaron's heart was broken into smithereens. The fact that he was left behind Woody again made Fowl laugh hysterically as he bled. King once again sat in his forge and made something. When he came home, Charlotte began to demand to feed her again. But this time the guy didn't even yell at her for her impudence. Placing a tray in front of her with the same food that he prepares every day, the girl winced in disgust. Then King, silently, handed her the metal flower that he had so diligently crafted in the forge. Charlotte was puzzled by his action, but the guy said it was just a gift. Charlotte still couldn't believe that King did this for her. The guy calmly added that he wanted to give her something before they parted ways. Touched, Charlotte decided not to bother King with her complaints about food. After dinner, sitting in her room, the girl could not stop admiring the iron flower given to her. She had never received gifts from anyone, so this pleasant feeling was new to her. While the girl was looking at her little happiness, Kai quietly crept into the room. Not expecting to see him today, Charlotte quickly hid the gift in her bosom. Kai appeared to inform the young mistress about the imminent arrival of the master to the clan. The girl's nervous behavior, and what she was hiding could not escape the man's sharp gaze. Charlotte reassured the assistant, saying that this was not something to worry about. Kai reminded his mistress that she is the only and last hope. She must remember this, and therefore personal attachments will only get in the way. Charlotte, as if having come to her senses, firmly decided not to allow this to happen. Kai said out loud that he trusted the young mistress, but he thought to himself that something was wrong. Aaron Fall trained, swinging his blade angrily, he cursed Woody and couldn't believe that he was telling the truth. And if he was, then why did that girl leave him? He thought madly about himself, Woody and that woman. What was it about him that Aaron didn't? Even though Woody was talented enough to join the elite guard squad of the Four Deadly Heavens, one of the great families of the 9 heavens, and meanwhile he rots in this distant land. Fall had already learned the path of the blue heavenly sword, but he was still at the beginning level. Why couldn't he improve his level with his best efforts? Maybe this was his limit. With gnashing of teeth, he promised himself to kill them all, every single one. Suddenly someone used the technique of dark illusions of a distrustful heart. A voice began to say that when he begins to doubt himself, darkness will swallow his heart. The rage that boils inside will only lead to collapse and will never solve his problems. This part that he is looking at is only one of the few contained within him, and it does not define who he is as a whole. Eren did not understand who was here, but some voice continued to echo. One day, when he calms the rage within himself, his thoughts will become crystal clear. They will be a mirror reflecting the truth. It is like water that can flow even in the lowest places. Illuminated by the sun, it will evaporate and rise into the atmosphere. Convictions in the heart, the same principle as here. Having become the atmosphere, the rising winds will begin to blow away the clouds, as will the doubts in his heart. Let him allow his meridians to become the sea and his navel ring to become the base. Let him align his cerebral cortex with the heavens and he will rule the heavens. Someone's technique helped the man come to his senses and bring his emotions under control. But he still did not understand what kind of chi it was and who helped him. It was as if someone had opened a door and directed him to the right path. But there was no one nearby. Eren stood in the rain all alone. King, as usual, sat in his favorite place, on the roof of the 10,000 Skies building. Having gone down and went out into the street, he was about to go to his room, but I just felt incredibly gigantic chi from someone. A guy was walking through the main gate of the clan. He was all wounded, but his aura was like a fierce dragon. King was surprised by such a strong flow of aura, and his legs were ready to give way at any second. He realized that this guy was definitely a martial artist. Meanwhile, the stranger walked slowly, looking at the well-known Northern Heavenly Clan. Seeing King, the guy tensed and looked at him suspiciously. But he immediately relaxed when he noticed his brother, sister, Helga and the general running towards him. The man was surprised that his older brother and younger sister arrived before him. Helga, seeing King standing nearby, greeted him with a slight tilt of her head. The guy answered the girl with the same slight tilt of his head. Alfie was worried when he came closer and noticed a bunch of wounds on his brother's body. With worry in her eyes, Helga theorized that Master Joe's wounds were inflicted by the last opponent of the 100-man challenge, Vincent Vance. His older brother offered to go and treat the wounds, but the guy assured that the man was a strong opponent, but not enough to hurt him. Alfie was curious to know which bastard was able to injure the rising star of the eastern sky, Salman Joe. It dawned on King that this guy was the third son of the Sacred Pillar, Gordon Joe of the Central Heavenly Alliance. With a smug smile, Salman said that those people looked suspicious, but nothing more. He was the one who shook Miram's world. He looked after the departing king. They hastened to tell him that this is the heir of the Northern Heavenly Clan, but there is no need to worry about him, because he is pitiful. But Master Joe continued to look after the retreating owner of these places. From the excitement and such a powerful aura of Salman Joe, King's palms began to sweat. He didn't expect to meet him here. His aura is terrifying, and his chi power is on a completely different level. As King approached his room, General Ars blocked his way. They were still strangers, so he introduced himself as the general of the elite Tiger Guards from the Four Deadly Heavens, Green Clark, who had come to deliver a message to the young master. King was invited to dinner at Watchin Palace. The main character found it funny that the guests invited the owner of this territory, but still he agreed to attend dinner. The general added that the gentleman should come tomorrow evening with his cousin. It was already night when Salman was relaxing in the hot bath and thinking about young King T. He found it strange that this guy had no chi and no martial arts, but there was definitely something strange coming from him. Whether physically or spiritually, the strength and will of the Northern Heavenly Clan was inherited by him. When King walked to the forge, he noticed Salman sitting near the wall in the lotus position. He had been waiting for the owner of the clan since early morning. Having formally introduced himself, Mr. Joe showed respect for the guy. It was an honor for him to meet King. Not expecting such goodwill from Salman, the main character introduced himself in response. Master Joe came to express his gratitude for the young man accepting him into the residence without prior request. Salman had long wanted to visit the Northern Sky clan and King finally granted his wish, so he was very grateful for such kindness. The main character, Offset, said that there is not much to see here since the place turned into ruins, so he hopes that the guest will not be disappointed. Master Joe hastened to tell the guy that it doesn't matter to him what the clan looks like from the outside. The main thing is the opportunity to see the only heir to the will of the Northern Heavenly Clan with his own eyes. An awkward silence fell between the men after Salman's words. By evening, King and Charlotte, under the gaze of those present, proudly walked to dinner at the Wachon Palace. She went with the guy because she had a really bad feeling about it. Besides, the girl could smell something tasty, but she couldn't let King eat it all. Charlotte was tired of eating the same thing day after day, so she only went to dinner for the sake of hearty dishes. King couldn't stop this woman, so he just watched her condescendingly. When the young people opened the door of the dining hall, members of the 9 pillar families were already waiting for them. Charlotte immediately drew attention to Salman, who looked like a lion. Salman also paid attention to Cousin King, which he was not sure about. She had a very unusual chi, but in any case, she was definitely not an ordinary person. The man stood up from the table to greet Master T. He was glad that the guys still attended their dinner. In awkward silence, the young people sat down at the dinner table. Mistress Helga shook her head weakly in greeting. Ava waved to King and Charlotte with a wide smile. Alfie looked arrogantly at the guys and suggested getting straight to the point. Helga and Salman stood up from the table at the same time, the man apologizing for using the Wachon Palace and for such an unexpected invitation, and the woman adding that they wanted to give King their seal of approval. They want to found the Azure Dragon Society, the purpose of which will be to involve martial youth in politics, so that their opinions will be taken into account by the Central Heavenly Alliance. Now there are only 3 of them here, but other martial masters have promised support. King was wondering why they were the only ones in the Northern Heavenly Clan now. Charlotte was completely engrossed in eating at this time, not paying attention to the negotiations. Helga replied that the older generation didn't like it when younger martial artists got together. Salman added with a smile that there is no one here who does not respect the Northern Sky Clan. Many have lived their lives honoring it. The history of opposing Silent Night for centuries is worthy of respect, which is why they want to establish organizations here. The message of this meeting will be the Azure Dragon Society's oath to the heavens, and so they want Master T to witness and give his seal of approval. From Charlotte's point of view, they wanted King's approval so that if something happened, he would take the blame. A bead of sweat ran down Helga's cheek from excitement because of the words of the guy's cousin. With confidence in his voice, King said he would witness their promise. As a sign of respect, Salman stood up and thanked Master T for the service he had rendered. For the rest of the evening, the young people did not talk anymore and only yawned boredly. Only Charlotte, through her strength, continued to fill her belly with food. It was already deep night, and people from the mercenary gang were still standing guard far from the clan. They were very unhappy about this. They hoped that after those people arrived, they would have a chance to join the 4 deadly heavens. But they looked at the gang members as shit. They were terribly hungry, and they were told to watch the area where even an ant could not crawl. The gang members hoped to feast on at least scraps of food, of which too much had been prepared. While they were discussing such injustice, a huge, threatening shadow grew behind them. Turning around, the men's eyes widened in surprise and horror. Aaron, while patrolling the area with his partner, noticed something strange in the rocks. But the second man did not hear anything. Then they heard a heartbreaking scream from the top of the rock, which soon died down. Aaron asked his partner who was located at the northwest entrance. He replied that Duke Rich and Cody Liu were there, who, moreover, did not answer the signal. The deputy captain rushed forward to find out the reason for this cry. His partner could not understand when the master became so good at martial arts. Puffing, the man climbed the mountain where Aaron stood motionless. The man's eyes widened at the sight before him. The remains of human limbs were scattered everywhere, and the whole earth was flooded with a sea of blood. The guy could not hold back vomiting. Aaron realized with horror that the remains belonged to Duke and Cody. At this time, dinner was in full swing. People were having small talk with each other. Charlotte, looking at all these people, whispered in King's ear that they looked like a bunch of idiots. The guy agreed with the girl, but added that they looked like a scary bunch of idiots. Puffing with dissatisfaction, Charlotte advised the guy to stay close to her, and then she would protect him. With a condescending smile, King looked at his ward and remained silent. Unexpectedly for the girl, King thanked Charlotte and agreed to her proposal. Turning away in embarrassment, she muttered that she would protect him until he left, not understanding why she even said this. Then Salman approached King, asking him to step aside for a second and discuss something. After the guys left, Helga approached Charlotte to ask how she liked the food. With a threatening look, Charlotte asked the girl when they would stop bothering King. Helga looked down at her interlocutor arrogantly. Jumping up from the table, Charlotte told the girl that there was no point in inviting King today, Helga replied that they needed his consent, but she apologizes for disturbing Master T. Without backing down, the cousin demanded that they simply leave him, because even without them, King's life was dull and miserable. Ava approached the girls and rudely said that Charlotte was the only one who burdened him even more. Besides, King did not object to their proposal, so let the cousin not interfere and know her place. Moreover, Charlotte is no different from them and brazenly takes advantage of his hospitality. Realizing that Ava was right, the girl looked away in confusion. Then all three girls turned to the window from which a loud roar came. A while earlier, the guys were standing on the balcony of the Watchin Palace. Master Joe was apologizing to King for suddenly asking for his consent, but he had one more request to Master T. He asked the main character to join the Azure Dragon Society to change this world together. But before he could hear the answer, a loud scream reached them. At the main gate of the Northern Heavenly Clan stood the House of Demon, Wilmer Rune, who was looking for the baby. A gang of mercenaries, coughing up blood, tried to prevent this thug from passing on. Compared to them, Wilmer was twice as tall and looked like a huge stone cliff. At once, all the mercenaries attacked him, trying to prevent him from going deeper into the clan. By creating a rock hurricane, Wilmer instantly scattered his opponents. Then he noticed a bright point in the sky approaching him. She approached with lightning speed and hit the monster with a huge explosion, which created a flurry of stones. Wilmer was curious who was so impudent and dared to challenge him. It was Salman Joe. He couldn't let the monster cause chaos and disorder here. Wilmer burst into laughter because this kid used a fancy nickname, Rising Star of the Eastern Sky, and moreover, single-handedly dealt with his gang of hidden ghosts. The monster simply could not believe it. Salman remembered that the other day he dealt with those bastards who, it turns out, were from the same gang. Then, as he thought, they are not mainland martial artists. Master Joe suggested that these guys might be from the Silent Night organization. With a smug smile, Wilmer said that the guys' eyes were filled not with fear, but with anticipation of an imminent battle. They stood opposite each other in a fighting stance. At this time, all wounded, Woody reached his general. Due to the noise, there was a real commotion in the dining room. Everyone was wondering what the hell was happening outside. Trembling with fear, Charlotte realized that this monster had been pursuing her since the moment of their battle. Then King, who was completely calm, took her by the shoulder. Charlotte warned him that this was not the person King could handle, so he needed to get out of here as quickly as possible. Looking at the windows, behind which there were already people from the gang, King replied that it was too late to leave. People in wolf skins burst into the hall, causing general excitement. Alfie didn't understand how the elite tiger guards didn't take care of the intruders. Goldie Lag got into a fighting position to protect Helga, who was terrified by what was happening. She thought about the fact that these were most likely people from Silent Night, but that's why they appeared so suddenly after so many years of calm. The girl hoped that Master Joe could defeat them. Letting down her hair, Charlotte stood in front of King, ready to defend him if anything happened. With confidence, she prepared to use the Chaos Demon technique. At this time, a battle was about to break out on the street between the monster and Master Joe, the latter hoping that he would deal with him as quickly as he could. He spat and attacked his opponent at the speed of light. Squinting his eyes against the bright light, the demon realized that the guy was using the light of enlightenment. Hitting Wilmer in the chest, Salman shouted at him to accept the chance to receive the highest reward. When the monster flew away from a powerful blow, the guy was behind him and used opening the third eye. To finally finish off the demon, Master Joe used the 3 successive bursts of light technique. Wilmer flew into a pile of stones. All his bones were broken, and he himself, it seemed, should already be dead. Salman, who did not receive a scratch, was pleased with the work done. This attack took more mental power from him than he thought, and when the chance comes, he must return the favor and find out more information about this demon. Then, behind the guy, cracks and pops were heard. The demon, who should have been dead, suddenly stood up. With an unnatural face, Wilmer praised the guy for trying to kill him. But this is not enough to defeat him. The moment he found himself in the air above the guy's head, the demon was about to strike back. After creating a real tornado, Wilmer used the technique of demonic dive of chaotic rotation. With a mocking tone, he told the guy, who was already lying at his feet covered in blood, that he was not on top of this world after defeating some masters who were greedy for glory. But seeing the potential in Salman, Wilmer was ready to let him live. He added that the guy would find him when he became stronger, only then the death of Master Joe would be fun for him. About to move on, the demon looked at Salman, who took his hand, thereby holding him. Wilmer is furious at the impudence of this piece of shit, who refuses to give up and, moreover, refuses his mercy. The demon was ready to tear him to pieces when a voice stopped him. He turned towards the voice, not understanding how some girl dared to disturb him. In front of him stood Ava, who was 3 times his size. The tiger guards and his family were already rushing to help Salman. Alfie was horrified when he saw his little sister standing next to the monster. Ava began to tell the demon that her father was one of the 9 heavens of the Central Heavenly Alliance, and if Wilmer did not stop, he would come and kill him. But before she had time to finish this, the demon tore her apart with one wave of his hand. Helga covered her mouth with her hands in horror at what she saw. Alfie, looking up from the fight, screamed with tears in his eyes. His little sister exploded. Out of anger and grief, he rushed towards him from the balcony of the palace at the speed of light. General Greg tried to stop the young master from a rash act, but it was too late. Determined to take revenge on the demon, Alfie used the Crimson King's demon hand technique. But with one wave of his hand, Wilmer swept him out of his way with the words that this place is filled with only useless small fry. From the palace, King watched all this with undisguised horror. Charlotte yanked him to the side like a rag doll, screaming to keep him behind her at all times. Along the way, the girl dealt with her opponents over and over again. Helga was beside herself with what she saw, not paying attention to the mess unfolding around her. Her plans did not include the death of her younger sister. She did not understand who this monster was and why he was attacking them. Maybe King T was behind this attack, although he did not look like a member of their group. The girl inspired herself that she needed to calm down and that, more importantly, find out more information regarding Silent Night. She asked Leg to move to another location because things weren't looking good right now. With undisguised cruelty, Helga told her that they should take only Master Salman and Master Alfie and get out of here. The rest can be abandoned here. King, hearing the girl's words, looked at her with condemnation in his eyes. Helga caught a glimpse of the guy's indifferent gaze and felt awkward for a second, so she quickly turned away from the young man. Leaving everyone to their fate, the girls ran out of the room. General Greg cut off the path of the gang, which was already rushing after them. Wilmer, seeing the girls running out, slowly moved towards them, leaving the dying Alfie behind him. For Helga and the others, no matter how they wanted to use King, his value was immeasurable in their plan. The girl regretted that they had to leave the guy here, but she must return to the mainland and prepare a new plan. But now her main task was to make sure that no one knew about Master Salman's defeat today, so she used the heavenly illusion enveloping fate technique. King stood on the balcony and watched as Helga put her technique into action. He was surprised that she could spread her spiritual energy without the use of aids, so it could definitely be said that she was a member of the Great Grand family. When the demon fell into illusion, such an unusual technique seemed interesting to him. Having grabbed the 2 wounded brothers, the girls hurried to get away from the clan as quickly as possible, because the illusion would not hold the monster for long. The tiger guards knew that they were thrown here to certain death, but they still did everything they could to gain some time. According to King, they died a dog's death, chasing fame and recognition from those who would never acknowledge their death. During this time, Charlotte killed the last member of the wolf gang. Having emerged from Helga's illusion, Vilma roared furiously, causing the guys to freeze in place. He demanded that the bastards finish their tricks. Realizing that everyone had escaped, the monster shouted after them to come back when they became stronger. In any case, he doesn't need them, because his original goal is Charlotte. Turning to the girl, Vilma said with a smile that he was really looking forward to their meeting. Focusing on the unkillable House of Demon, Charlotte quietly told King to get out of here. With anticipation, the demon shouted that since she was the only hope of that woman, he must kill her. But will this be enough to shake the heart of this witch, and let Charlotte blame her death on the one who doomed her to such a fate? Having completed his monologue, Wilmer attacked the Watchin Palace. From such a powerful attack, King lost consciousness for a minute, and when he woke up, he saw a woman hovering above him. King realized that it was the White Night Witch. A long time ago, inside Silent Night there was a ruler of the night who had absolute authority. Even the 4 demon lords supported him. They were known as the Hurricane of Darkness, Dark Gods of the Spear. They were the trusted men of the ruler of the night, and used their enormous power in his place. The terror and destruction caused by these 4 were so enormous that even speaking their names was forbidden. Their strength was the same as the 9 heavens from the Central Heavenly Alliance, if not more. As King thought, Charlotte turned out to be not so simple. But he never expected that she would be the heir of the White Knight Witch. At this time the girl used the will of the Silver Spirit technique. Wilmer was somewhat surprised that the girl did not run away from him like last time. Turning to King, Charlotte said that she could not hold the demon for too long, so he needed to escape as soon as possible. Not seeing King anywhere, the girl was glad that he managed to escape. After a short fight, the wounded Charlotte was in Wilmer's arms. It seemed funny and stupid to him that she was sacrificing herself for the sake of that boy who had left her without a second thought. Already on the verge of death, the girl remembered the joyful time she spent with King. He was the only person who showed her love. Mentally she said goodbye to the guy, thanking him for everything he had done for her, when suddenly the demon released her from his tight grip. Ready to say goodbye to life, the girl opened her eyes and saw that someone had cut the monster's hand. King, who miscalculated the timing while running for his blade, came to Charlotte's defense. Wilmer could not understand who this guy was standing in front of him, and what had just happened. King introduced himself as the leader of the 5th generation of the Northern Heavenly Clan, King T. Charlotte did not expect that a guy would come to her defense without any abilities. King looked at her out of the corner of his eye, and told her not to go far and stay behind him. With confidence, the young man pointed his blade towards the demon and took a fighting stance. The demon did not understand what technique the guy was using and, most importantly, his wounds could not be healed, although his body was immortal. Not imagining that King would be fighting in a real fight so soon against such a strong opponent, he was worried about whether he would be able to use his power correctly. The chi coming from the guy was bothering the demon a lot, so he definitely had to get rid of him. With enormous power, he was going to finish this brat off with one blow. But King managed to dodge the demon's fatal blow at the last moment. Wilmer couldn't imagine anyone being able to dodge this. With frenzy, the demon was about to strike again, this time the last. But this time too, King successfully dodged the enemy's blow. The monster again and again and again struck one blow after another, but the guy escaped from everyone unharmed. Unhinged with anger, Wilmer roared, calling King a fucking bastard. At this time, the deputy captain, Aaron Fall, was already rushing to help. He checked all patrolled areas, but all the guards were incapacitated. He knew that he shouldn't have come to this godforsaken place. All surviving comrades hurried to get away as quickly as possible in order to survive. Aaron didn't understand what the hell was going on here, and rushing back to the clan, he noticed a man hiding. It was the gang leader who, trembling with fear, sat and waited for all this to end. The deputy captain asked him what was going on here. The fat man replied that some bastard had come and started fighting them, so he advised Aaron to get out of here before he was killed along with the others. Fall wanted to reason with the captain, saying that their comrades were killed there and, at least, they need to avenge the dead. But Greg was adamant, he did not want to give his life for others. Aaron shouted that these guys were loyal warriors who trusted him. They gave their lives for someone like Greg and he, at least as a leader, should honor their respect for himself. Greg replied that this had nothing to do with him, and he could take revenge for the soldiers later. Now the main thing was for them to survive. After these words, Fall kicked the captain with a flourish. As he left, he said to Greg, who was lying around, that as a person he was trash and nothing more. The fat man shouted in the back to the retreating deputy that he was too arrogant, and if he wanted to die, then let him dare, and Greg would do everything to survive. Approaching the Northern Sky clan, Aaron promised himself to survive and crush all the bastards who looked down on him. He would return the favor to them all.